Welcome to episode 412 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I am interviewing writer-director Trevor Hawkins, who just did a cool indie drama called Lotawana. I was researching what I might be able to do with cryptocurrencies and NFTs for the rideshare killer, and I kept running into articles about his film. So I reached out to him, and he very graciously agreed to come on this podcast and answer all my questions. He minted some NFTs for his film, one of the first films to really try this. It wasn't a huge success for him, but it did get him some press, which is how I found him. So we'll dig into that a little bit, the whole crypto NFT wave and how that might affect the television and film industries in the future. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. And I've talked about this before, but I'm actually now on TikTok as well. So please, if you see my TikTok videos, give it a like, give it a share, and all of those likes and shares really do help with these social media. It's just that's the currency that they run in. So the more likes and shares that I get, the further these videos seem to go. So it is very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 412. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline inquiry letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing writer-director Trevor Hawkins. Here is the interview. Welcome, Trevor, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Well, hey there, Ashley. It's awesome to be here.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
So I live in a small lake town called Lake Lotawana, Missouri, and I started filming my friends skateboarding and wakeboarding when I was in high school, and it just kind of became a passion of mine. I always loved the skateboard and wakeboard videos more than the actual tricks themselves. And then when I was in high school, I went over to my buddy's house and he showed me Requiem for a Dream, Donnie Darko, and A Clockwork Orange in his basement in 1 week. And it just kind of blew my mind. And it was no hope from then on. I knew that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And then just kept with the skateboarding and wakeboard thing. Eventually I started doing like some smaller commercial work, and then I just kept developing my style and working on personal projects. And then eventually one thing led to another, and I had my own production company. Now I'm a repped DP and director for commercial work, and I financed and wrote and directed my first feature film called Lotawana.
Perfect. So we're going to dig into that for sure. So just talk about your kind of career trajectory here. I noticed that you do editing, cinematography, as you mentioned, director, as you mentioned, but you also have done a lot of writing. What do you see yourself in those roles? And like, what is your ultimate goal? Do you just want to direct? Do you just want to edit? Why are you doing so many roles? And do you want to continue to be sort of that auteur of these films?
Well, I don't necessarily prefer doing all of the roles, but since I started out doing it that way, and when you don't have a ton of money to work with, ideally in a perfect world, you get to hire a cinematographer who's better than you are and an editor who's better than you are. But when you don't have a lot of money like myself, sometimes it's easier just to do it the way you want if you can, instead of trying to get other people, like trying to communicate that with other people. But I mainly consider myself these days like a writer, director, DP. I do edit and color as well. I enjoy it, but it's not really like what I'm trying to do with myself. I wrote my first full-length script with Lotawana. I had never written a script before, but knew I wanted to direct a movie. And so I just Googled how to write a script and then jumped in. And then I just finished my fourth full-length script that that's the next one that I want to get produced. But yeah, so mainly I consider myself a writer-director these days.
Perfect. Let's talk just a little bit about some of the things you just mentioned, like with the skateboarding and wakeboarding videos. We've had a number of people on the podcast here that started out that way. And I'm curious, did you do anything with those videos? Did you put them on YouTube? What can someone do? If there's a high school kid listening to this now, what do you recommend they do? If they're just basically shooting videos to kind of build their craft, build their sense of style, but what can you ultimately do with those? Do you enter them in film festivals? Do you put them online? What is sort of the way to market those and get some exposure with them?
Well, I'm kind of an old dog, so I don't know if I'd be much help in that realm, because when I was doing it, it was way before YouTube. So what we did was we actually created physical DVDs and then just walked around and sold them and handed them out. And it was kind of just more of a fun thing. I've never really taken anything I've done super seriously. But I've been lucky enough that the few times I have put stuff online, it's gotten me a bit of notoriety. I made some short films a long time ago, and I got some notice from National Geographic at one point and got published by them. And I would say, yeah, just post stuff, get it out there as much as you can, because you never know who's going to see it.
Gotcha. Now, how did you make this leap from shooting videos, skateboarding videos for your friends, to getting commercial work? Did you do some free commercials for local businesses? Explain that transition, going from basically just a guy who enjoys doing this to someone who's trying to make a living and doing it professionally. How do you talk those first, businesses into hiring you as a director when you don't have a big reel of commercials you've done?
Sure. I think it's a lot more organic than it seems like it would be, because I just started making stuff that I thought was cool, and then I just show it to people and they'd be like, "Oh, did you see what Trevor made?" And then word got around, and then sure enough, some local people wanted some small commercials. They just asked me to do them. And then I got lucky enough. There was a hunting show starting up. I'm not a hunter myself, but there was a TV show starting up here in the area with a couple guys I went to high school with, and they asked me if I wanted to make the show. So I jumped on and I made the show, and it kind of took off in the hunting world because it really was something that stylistically that industry hadn't seen yet. And then from there, I got my first big client, which was AMC Theaters, and we got to make some of their pre-roll, some of the content that plays before the actual film in the theater. We got to start making that stuff, and then it just snowballed from there. And then, that's how I got into commercial work. And I wish I knew how to crack into the feature world better, because getting a film off the ground is about the hardest thing I've ever done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no kidding. So that's sort of the next question. So a guy like yourself, why do you stay outside of Hollywood? Why don't you move to LA and, make a go of it here? Is there are advantages to being not in LA versus some things that maybe you wish you could be in Hollywood? What is sort of your thinking around moving to LA?
Oh, I mean, I would in a heartbeat if I was all of my friends, all of my family, my entire support system and everything about who I am is rooted in Lake Lotawana, which is where I've lived my whole life and I still live. If I were to leave and go to LA, I wouldn't be myself anymore. And Lotawana was based on and shot at the lake I live at. The second movie that I want to get off the ground, my fourth script, is also based around a Missouri lake. And so I would love to be able to somehow do both, because there's so many opportunities in Los Angeles just being around so many different people. But it's just not something that I feel like my heart can do with the life I'm living right now.
Gotcha. So another question I had as I was sort of preparing for the interview, as I said, I noticed you did a lot of editing, cinematographer, director, writer, but you don't have a lot of producing credits. So talk about that a little bit. Like for Lotawana, who was your producer and how did you meet that person? Because it seems like a writer, that's definitely someone a writer could really, needs to meet, is that good producer that sees value in their work and is able to kind of work some of the business end of that. But who was your producer and how did you meet that person?
So Nathan Kincaid and my wife, Corey Jo Hawkins, were my producers for Lotawana. And I guess you would call myself sort of a ghost producer as well. I'm not trying to be a producer with myself, but just being an independent filmmaker, you inevitably have to almost produce everything you do. Like I said, I financed Lotawana. I paid for the whole thing. I got a mortgage against my house. And then Nathan, he was integral in the production because he had a lot more experience with how to actually produce the shoots themselves. And so he also came on as an assistant director. So he was like, all right, now we got to put this schedule in place. And he's sort of a genius when it comes to lining up talent and props and schedule and locations and how to make sense of this huge ass like puzzle that just staring at it feels so daunting. But he kind of looked at it, chopped it all into pieces, and then did the three of us, and then Corey did everything else as well alongside Nathan. So I think it's probably just indie filmmaking at its finest. We're probably more indie than what's considered indie a lot of times. But yeah, we just guessed, and we put in a lot of hard work and made some mistakes, but learned a lot.
So let's dig into your new film, Lotawana. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick pitch or log line. What is the pitch for this film?
Sure. So it is a young couple that are kind of fed up with maybe the materialistic lives that they've been living, sort of into the wild vibes, where they want to throw everything to the wind, and they go and live out on a sailboat, and they sort of like construct a new world for themselves. Well, maybe because of a bit of their lack of preparedness, they have struggles, the world crashes down on them in certain ways. And so the whole movie exists as a thought experiment to the viewer of, can we rewrite our own rules of modern existence, or does society operate the way it does for a reason? And that whole theme came about because I had I'm a sailor as well, and I had an opportunity to go sailing around the world with a buddy of mine, but I'd be gone for like 3 or 4 years. And it was sort of this like idealistic thing that I really like. I had to do it. But then whenever, like, we even bought a sailboat and all this stuff, but then I knew that I would be leaving all of the momentum I'd been building this whole time to become a filmmaker. And being a filmmaker has always been my dearest goal, like not sailing around the world. That would just be kind of a bonus. And so I really, and along with meeting my wife at that exact same time, I really had to like make that decision of like, wow, do I really like buckle down, focus on my commercial work and like keep the axe to the grind, or do I throw everything to the wind and sort of go reinvent my life? And I'm really interested in the interface of those ideas, and like other movies like Into the Wild and recently Nomadland as well have explored that as well. And I love that idea.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about your writing process a little bit. Just how do you typically write? Are you one of these people that has a home office? You write? Do you need to go to Starbucks with ambient noise? What are your most productive writing days look like?
I actually kind of feel like I'm a weirdo when it comes to writing process. I have really no struggle. I one time heard an interview with Paul Thomas Anderson where he said that he never gets writer's block. He suffers from having too many ideas, and that doesn't mean they're good, but like I kind of feel like I suffer from that as well, where like I have so many things I want to do that like I never get writer's block. I have a 1-year-old and I work full time, and we're like remodeling the cabin house that we live in, and like just finding the hours is the hardest part. But once I dedicate like a morning, like, all right, tomorrow morning I'm going to get up at 6 and write till noon, I have no problem. Like, I'm just a machine, and then I don't stop at noon. I'll write until 9 p.m. that night because I'm just so like cherished of like having free time is like the hardest thing to come by in my life right now. And so I know that when I get it, I just like got to make it worth it. Otherwise, like, just like go to work kind of like, all right, this is my time. I got to do it. Because if I sit here and dream off and don't get any words down, then I'm like, I would hate myself essentially, because then I blew like one of my small windows. But yeah, once I'm flowing, like it, I'm sure just as well as any writer is like, it's so hard. Like, all right, it's 6 a.m. My brain's not working. Like, I gotta make this time worth it. And like, all right, I'm not feeling creative at all. This is kind of feeling like more like a drag than what I thought it'd be. And then once you like force yourself to like hit a few keys and then like, no, let me just go back and start reading. I'll reread like what I wrote last time I sat down. And I think just like reading the last thing that I wrote kind of gets the wheels spinning automatically. And then you're like, oh no, let me change that. Let me change that. Let me change that. And just making those edits all of a sudden is enough to just jump off the cliff. And then once you've jumped, then you're just free falling and writing in creative mode the rest of the time. But that's essentially my whole process.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great tip. I'm curious, how much time do you spend outlining? It sounds like you had a pretty good idea sort of thematically what this movie was going to be, but how much time do you spend just like outlining it, index carding, versus how much time do you spend actually in final draft cranking out pages?
I outline religiously now. Lotawana was my first script, so I didn't realize how valuable an outline would be. I had sort of like a rough rudimentary one, but kind of like just made a mad mess on the page, like just hit the points along the way. But now I create a note in my, like on my laptop, there's like the notes app, and I'll just do bullet points and highlight different colors for different, fill out that outline until it is essentially the whole movie. And then when I sit down to actually write, it's quite easy because I know, all right, this scene takes place here with these characters and these 3 or 4 things have to happen. And so there's not an infinite number of possibilities to write that scene. And so it's like the actual writing process in final draft goes like that for me. It's super fast.
I'm curious, on a film like this that's kind of a subtle drama, how do you approach screenplay structure? You're not going to have, that asteroid crashing into Earth on page 25. So how do you get through the structure? How do you keep a story like this moving?
That's my first movie, so I'm just like, it's a miracle that it even got made. It's a miracle that it even looks like a movie. It's a miracle that it is even somewhat good looking. Like I said, that was my first script I ever wrote. And so it was simply just naivety. Like, if it works, the only reason it would work is just because of those instincts you just inherit from being a movie lover your whole life. Just by watching movies, you have some sort of instinct of like, that would be cheesy. This might be a more interesting way to play that. But now I absolutely think of that. Now that I'm starting to learn the craft of screenwriting more, like I said, I got my 4th script done, and learning structure and then abandoning structure for the right reasons and breaking rules, but knowing why you're breaking the rules, like just becoming good at craft is so interesting to me. Like, when I first started out, I thought you could just do whatever you want, whenever you want. And then I paid the price in the editing room with Lotawana. The first cut of the movie was 4 hours long. And it took me like 3 or 4 years to get it cut down to 90 minutes, which is why we shot it in 2015, which is why it's just now coming out. And had I been a better screenwriter, I would have written that script more appropriate to a finished product of a film. But that was essentially my film school. I didn't go to film school. And now when I write a script, I'm like, wow, like it is so important to actually like stick to the tried and true rules of like, don't meander on stuff that isn't relevant to the story. Yeah, you can throw in some flavor here and there just to kind of make the movie interesting and tonally awesome, but you can't linger. You got to like in and out and like get your beats in and like figure out what the story's for. And so Lotawana is completely different than this 4th script I just finished that I want to produce next. That one's much more in the realm of like one of Edgar Wright's Cornetto movies, where it's just sort of like it's purposeful, it's page count, it's like moving, but it's like fun and hopefully something no one's ever seen before.
So let's talk about NFTs for a little bit. I was doing some research on movies doing NFTs, and your movie kept coming up as just in articles and in videos, people were mentioning it. So let's just start out. I know there's going to be a lot of people listening to this that don't even understand what NFTs are. So maybe you can kind of give us your definition. What is an NFT? And then ultimately, how does it become useful for filmmakers? Sure.
I can answer the first one. I'm not sure if I can answer the second one anymore. But an NFT is essentially a shorthand for non-fungible token, and all that is like fungible means, I don't need to get into all that. An NFT is essentially a piece of digital art that there's only one of because there's only one creator, and through the blockchain, because a blockchain is one consistent thing across all these different platforms that's unhackable, you can upload your original art. And even though somebody can screenshot your art or duplicate it a million times because it's just digital artwork, there will always be a certificate of origin that says you or someone, whoever buys it, will be the original owner of that piece of art. And so what that's done is it started treating digital art like a gallery would classically treat a painting or something like that. There's only one. And so there's a lot of people that find an inherent value in that and like being the original owner of some piece of art. And so that's essentially all it is on the blockchain. And the blockchain is a new technology, and I'm not an expert on the blockchain or anything. But what happened was NFTs, when they started getting popular, we found ourselves sitting there with a recently finished movie, and we're like, wow, there's a lot of hype going on with this NFT stuff. What if we just like said, screw it, I own the movie outright, we can do whatever we want with it, and just threw it up online and just see what happens with it. And sure enough, it got a lot of buzz, and we were really fortunate. We got like interviews with Movie Maker and IndieWire and a handful of other press in the industry that we're really thankful for. And we had high hopes of what we're like, oh, this could be really cool. We'll sell the ownership and blah, 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 all this stuff. Well, it turns out that because of technicalities with the SEC, which I'd never even heard of before this whole thing, our lawyers told us that technically what we were doing was illegal, and you cannot actually sell shares of a company to people you cannot vet. And since people can purchase NFTs just through a screen name, you cannot properly vet that person. So we had to stop what we were doing, and it was kind of this like sad deal. But even aside from that, we thought it was going to be a lot more interesting to raise money and funds to create our next film. But then as we sold a few NFTs, we saw the volatility of the market, and like you have this much money this day, and then the next day you have that much money, and I'm like, well, it's weird. It's almost like trying to raise money on the stock market. Like it's not a for sure thing because everything's up and down and volatile. Mm-hmm. And then also at the end of the day, the blockchain and NFTs aren't a hype machine intrinsically in themselves. They are just a platform. So it's almost kind of like how many people out there in the world are trying to get famous on the internet? The internet is just a platform. Like you have to have your own inherent following, and you have to have your own inherent reason for people to care about you. I'm just a no-name indie filmmaker that's releasing my first movie. So me jumping on the blockchain, like I have no notoriety in the blockchain space either. And so it was kind of this like harsh reality of like, wow, since I'm a nobody, yeah, I'm the first one doing this and we got some press for it, but I'm still like had a famous filmmaker like Paul Thomas Anderson or Quentin Tarantino done what we did, it would have just blown up and skyrocketed, and who knows what would have happened. They could have made millions and millions and blah, blah, blah. But like, since we don't have that following yet, it was essentially kind of like, yeah, we made a little splash, but we're kind of right where we were. So we had to really adjust our expectations for the blockchain. It's, I think, going to be awesome down the road, but I don't think for folks like me, it's there yet.
Gotcha. So, what did you actually mint as NFTs? Did you do like screen captures from the movie? Were they stills from the movie? What were you going to actually offer as NFTs?
So we offered 3 different types of NFTs. We offered actual copyright shares to own the actual movie itself, and those are the ones that we had to stop selling because of a technical legality. And then we also sold tickets to our online world premiere. So people, and those are still for sale as well. I think December 9th is going to be the night of the first ever world premiere via the internet, sold via NFTs in the blockchain, which is kind of cool. But so that'll be, instead of doing like a classic theatrical premiere where you're like rent a space in Hollywood or something and have a bunch of people come, this will be like a streaming thing that we'll do a live Q&A with the cast and crew, and we'll host the movie. It'll be kind of like a digital event, so people from all over the world can attend. Those NFTs are still for sale on OpenSea. And then the third type of NFT we sold, which already sold out, we listed 20 movie frames from the film. So we minted 20 different NFTs, and they've all already sold. And so you can only list one piece of artwork once. So that particular movie frame is technically, that NFT for that movie frame is owned by people out in the world, and only one person can own it. And that's pretty fun.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. But I mean, if you sold 20, why didn't you do 40 or 400 or 4,000? Why did you stop at 20?
Just because scarcity. We don't like not all the frames in the movie, like half motion blur frames of people in conversation aren't that cool. So we kind of just cherry picked like 20 really cool ones and just decided to do as an experiment. And they've all sold out, so who knows if they'll rise in value in the future or not. But and they were super cheap. I think we sold them for like like $5 a piece or something like that, just more as a fun thing.
I think your point about having a following is so important. It's not unlike Kickstarter. If you're going to do a Kickstarter, you can throw your thing up on Kickstarter.com, but that doesn't mean anybody's going to actually give money to it unless you actually have this following already built.
That's a better way to say it than what I said. That's way better.
So, and I'm curious, what do you see in the future? Are you sort of bullish on NFTs? Ultimately, like, how do you see ultimately in the future, how could filmmakers make this work from you? I mean, you mentioned Quentin Tarantino. If he'd have done one, he could have sold millions. But what can people do in the future? How is this going to help filmmakers in the future?
That's the question that I'm not sure I'm equipped to answer, because I'm not a blockchain guy. I'm not an NFT guy. I'm a sensitive, creative guy that I my whole life is spent writing and directing and making movies, and I'm a hopeless romantic artist. The actual like nuts and bolts of how this could be good for filmmakers, or that's more of a question for people out there that actually know what this could turn into one day. I just know your Kickstarter point was right hit the nail on the head, because it's just a platform. The blockchain is just a platform essentially. And if you're a nobody, you're going to be a nobody on that platform. If you're somebody, if you jump onto that platform, you're already going to have a following. So I mean, that's a great question. If you could, I bet there's a lot of companies. We had talks with companies that are racing into the NFT and blockchain space for cinema and Hollywood. They don't know. We had talks with actual blockchain companies themselves, and they said, hey, if you're the one that can answer these questions, then you're going to be the next millionaire, mega millionaire, whatever. Like right now, it's the Wild West. No one knows what's going to happen. Blockchain is cool in theory because it's verifiable across the planet. So it's almost like all business, all creative, everything becomes not public domain, but publicly visible. So when everything's out in the open, you can't fake anything. And that's just itself. That's why cryptocurrencies are so popular, is because money can be verified. And yeah, I mean, I'm kind of spitting at this right now, acting like I know what I'm talking about, but I'm not an expert at this at all.
Gotcha. I'm curious though, how did you build that buzz? How was it just because you guys were so early, but how did you get that buzz where you're getting meetings with these companies, where you got in Movie Maker magazine? Did you do some press releases? Did you do any kind of PR reach out? Like, how did you build that buzz? Because I think that was sort of going in the direction where you could have potentially, if you'd gotten over that hump, maybe become somebody in the blockchain community just as being the first.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened was we minted those NFTs, and then my wife created a quick press release, and we sent it to, what was the first one? It was one of those publications, and they picked us up, and we got an article, and then from that it just snowballed. Like the problem is that Hollywood wasn't ready for NFTs like the rest of the world. Like nobody even knew what they were. So whenever the article got passed along and people started talking about it, we were so ahead of the curve that it was hard even like having people take us seriously. And even though we were the first ones in the world to do this, which I'm stoked about, we'll always be the first ones in the world to bring Hollywood into the NFT space in this way. Yeah, I think Hollywood's still decades behind, or a decade at least, because like the forces that be within Hollywood and the structures that are already set up and the way that money is classically made within Hollywood, it's just too strong of a paradigm to just throw it to the wind and gamble all that money into the blockchain, right? I think what's probably going to happen is big studios and things will probably start dipping their toe in, like if Marvel and all those mega corporations are like, all right, we're going to like have some additional assets that are only available as NFTs as sort of like a case study. And if those go really well, I think they'll gradually start moving. But right now I have no prediction for what the blockchain holds for Hollywood.
One of the big things that's interested me is this whole idea of smart contracts where you can mint these NFTs, but the original artist can get 5%, 10%, 20%, whatever is written up in these smart contracts. And then the blockchain keeps track of all that. So it seems like a guy like, let's say an independent filmmaker like yourself, if you could get sort of at least some sort of ball rolling, and then there's a market for these NFTs, then you as a filmmaker have a residual source of money coming back to you as people are buying and selling these NFTs, as you're making new movies that are bigger and better, the value of those goes up and you continuously get 10% through this sort of smart contract things. And it's really not unlike selling stock. Like as an artist, I mean, someone might listen to this podcast and think, wow, Trevor really knows what's going on. I really believe in him. They might go buy some of those NFTs. And so then they're almost buying stock in you as an artist. And as you continue to make movies in 10 years, inevitably those things, I mean, think if George Lucas had done that for Star Wars, how much some NFTs, if he'd have minted a couple of frames, 20 frames, can you imagine how much those would be worth? If you had one of the 20 frames from the original Star Wars movie as an NFT, how much those would actually be worth? And especially if George Lucas could get 10% as these things were bought and sold.
I feel like you should be the one being interviewed because that was put so much better than I would have said it. Everything you said, you hit the nail on the head there, man. Like, yeah, for sure.
I'm still learning this too. And I would recommend people, and I mentioned this in the email when I reached out to you, Gary Vaynerchuk is a big social media marketing guru type guy. And he has started an NFT project where he's created these animated characters and he's minted them. And they're worth, I think he minted 10,000 of these things and they're worth 50,000 each. Now, to your point, he had a following before he got into this. So he comes to it as a famous person, but he's very much understanding sort of where this is going to go. And I see it, as I said, any artist could potentially take advantage of some of these same things. Obviously, maybe not on that scale, but potentially. So I'm learning right there with you. So this has been a fascinating discussion. And I do appreciate your being so candid about it as well.
Yeah, of course, man. Only ever nothing but 100% honest. And you said it perfectly. If the blockchain is essentially just like the internet. There's so many people on the blockchain. There's so many people on the internet. There's so many people in real life. Like, you're not going to be successful on the blockchain unless you have a following and a way to get people to you. And I think from what we saw, just sort of like on the outside watching the NFT space, when we were seeing what other people were doing, when we dove into it, there was this mass flood of like all these digital artists were releasing all this digital art. Now, like, I mean, it's got to be a spike. Like, you would think that like this is like something that can't be sustainable. Like people selling little cat GIFs for like $1 million or something. Like there's going to be like 10 million of those cat GIFs within a year.
And I see these, and I see these on TikTok, these people telling you how to mint, like you set it up in Photoshop and then you can just create 10,000 unique things by swapping out the hair color and the eye color, this sort of programmatic way. And clearly, those are clearly never going to be worth it.
Devalues the whole thing and it just makes it a bubble.
Yeah. So I'm right there with you. Anyways, I like to wrap up these interviews just by asking the guests, is there anything that you've seen recently that you thought was really great? Netflix, Hulu, HBO, anything out there that you would recommend to screenwriters you thought was maybe really interesting?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Perfect. Usually people don't want to give me their, I usually put them on the spot and they don't have an answer. So this is great. You do.
I don't know if this is something that's going to be as useful for screenwriters, but definitely useful for screenwriters, directors, cinematographers, the whole bit. But I think it's 1985. I recently watched a Russian movie called Come and See, and it blew my mind. It was so freaking cool. Just the craft of filmmaking in its most pure form. I keep a revolving top 50 movies of all time favorite list of my own. And once I saw Come and See, I was like, shit, which one of my dearest movies do I have to kick off that list? Because I have to put this Come and See movie on this. Like, it's so hard to believe that no one knows this movie, and it's got to be one of the greatest movies of all time. It's just...
And where is it? Where did you happen to find it?
I just found it online somewhere. I don't even remember where I watched it. It was a few months ago by now, maybe early summer or something like that. But I've been telling everybody about it since I've seen it. It's pretty cool.
Perfect. Well, that's a great recommendation. Definitely one I had not heard of. So how can people see Lotawana? What's the release schedule going to be like for that?
So Lotawana is coming out this winter, actually, on all the major streaming platforms like the video on demand stuff. So we'll be on Apple iTunes, Google Play, which is also, I think they're doing YouTube as well. So Google Play will also be on like YouTube TVs and movies. And then we'll be on Amazon and Vudu, possibly. Yeah, that's the fourth one, I think. But yeah, it's like $3.99 to rent it. So it's no money to pretty much watch the movie. But yeah, it's coming out this winter. And I think it's going to be February 22nd as of right now, if everything goes well.
Perfect. Gotcha. And how can people keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing, I will round up and put in the show notes so people can click over and find you.
Love it. Thank you. Yeah, everything. The only social media I really have is on Instagram, and I have an Instagram. It's just Trevor Hawkins Film. That's my name. And each of the words have underscores. And then there's Lotawana has an Instagram, and my production company, Mammoth, has an Instagram as well.
Well, perfect. Well, Trevor, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come talk with me. Good luck with this film, and good luck with your next film as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
Hey, thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Cool.
Bye. SYS's From Concept to Completion Screenwriting Course is now available. Just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/screenwriting course. It will take you through every part of writing a screenplay, coming up with a concept, outlining, writing the opening pages, the first act, second act, third act, and then rewriting. And then there's even a module at the end on marketing your screenplay once it's polished and ready to be sent out. We're offering this course in 2 different versions. The first version, you get the course, plus you get 3 analyses from an SYS reader. You'll get 1 analysis on your outline, and then you'll get 2 analyses on your first draft of your screenplay. This is just our introductory price. You're getting 3 full analyses, which is actually the same price as our 3-pack analysis bundle. So you're essentially getting the course for free when you buy the 3 analyses that come with it. And to be clear, you're getting our full analysis with this package. The other version doesn't have the analysis, so you'll have to find some friends or colleagues who will do the feedback portion of the course with you. I'm letting SYS Select members do this version of the course for free. So if you're a member of SYS Select, you already have access to it. You also might consider that as an option. If you join SYS Select, you will get the course as part of that membership too. A big piece of this course is accountability. Once you start the course, you'll get an email every Sunday with that week's assignment. And if you don't complete it, we'll follow up with another reminder the next week. It's easy to pause the course if you need to take some time off, but as long as you're enrolled, you'll continue to get reminders for each section until it's completed. The objective of the course is to get you through it in 6 months so that you have a completed, polished screenplay ready to be sent out. So if you have an idea for a screenplay and you're having a hard time getting it done, this course might be exactly what you need. If this sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/screenwriting course. It's all one word, all lowercase. I will, of course, link to the course in the show notes, and I will put a link to the course on the homepage up in the right-hand sidebar. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Jared Cohen about his new film, Deadlock, starring Bruce Willis. Jared was on the podcast before in episode 188, so check out that episode if you haven't already listened to it, as we talk about the early part of his career and kind of how he got started in the industry. But next week, we're going to dive into his new Bruce Willis action film called Deadlock and how that all came together for him. So stay tuned for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Trevor. As you can tell, I'm very bullish on cryptocurrencies in general, and I think there's a lot of potential with NFTs for film and television, especially for independent filmmakers like myself. So I'll be trying to bring in more of these types of interviews over the next few months, really as an exercise for me to learn. Hopefully people listening to this podcast can learn as well. If you have any experience with cryptocurrencies or NFTs, please do reach out to me. I'm very much in the learning phase right now, just reading as much as I can, watching as many videos about all of this as I can, and trying to absorb as much information as possible. But I'll just leave everybody with this. There was a video I saw on TikTok a couple of weeks ago, and it sort of described this. It sort of put cryptocurrencies in this historical perspective. There was a moment in human history where church and state got separated. It wasn't overnight, but it had a profound impact on society, on civilization. And that's the sort of change we're going to see over the next decade or two with cryptocurrencies as the monetary system actually gets removed from the government. These two things will be separated. Obviously, there's some very strong arguments on both sides of this. I mean, frankly, it is a little bit scary, but I think it is inevitable no matter how you feel about it. I think that this is an inevitable change. The biggest argument I hear about why this isn't going to happen, and it's a strong argument in many regards, is that governments, especially in places like China, but even here in the United States, the governments will never allow this because it strips the government of so much power. Obviously, if you remove the finance system from the government, a lot of their power is removed. But I don't think this argument, I think this argument fails to really understand what crypto is all about and sort of the decentralized nature of it. The cat is out of the bag, and there's really no way of putting it back in, especially with developing nations like El Salvador that are fully embracing this. They are investing heavily into cryptocurrency, and it makes sense for developing nations because for all practical purposes, they don't have a solid monetary system like we do in the United States. A lot of these developing nations essentially use the US dollar, so they don't like doing that. They would much rather have a currency that is not controlled by the United States, and cryptocurrencies offers that. So there's going to be a large part of the segment of the world, governments of the world like El Salvador, like the developing nations, that actually embrace this in a real way and encourage it and really build on this. So we will be left behind, as the first world will actually be left behind, I believe, in this case. Because of this, it's going to be this sort of inevitable change. And even if you listen to interviews of congressmen, senators here, some of them are starting to sort of wise up. There were some meetings actually this week in Congress, and it seems like a lot of them are sort of starting to understand this as well. Anyways, as I said, there's a lot of very, very valid arguments on both sides of this. Whether cryptocurrency is going to be good, it's definitely going to be a true democratization of the monetary system. And again, there's some good things to that in a lot of ways, bringing finance to people that financing and financing systems that monetary systems that to people that ultimately would not have had them in our current system. So that's obviously a really potentially a good thing. But there is also a potential downside to a lot of this as well. So it's definitely something I encourage people to at least start to learn about and keep up with. Because as I said, I after doing the research I have, and I'm certainly not an expert, it's becoming clearer to me that this is going to be a big change here in the monetary system over the next 5 years, 10 years, or maybe even 2 decades. Anyways, this is perhaps a talk for another day, and certainly not all geared towards screenwriting. Again, I just want to say, if anybody has experience with any of this stuff, please do reach out. As I said, I'm really just trying to be a sponge here and soak up as much information as I can. I'm very interested in this, just in sort of a general personal level. But again, I really do feel like there's going to be a lot of benefits to independent filmmakers and even studio filmmakers as they start to understand what these NFTs can really do. Anyway, that's our show. Thank you for listening.